Freedom. The word alone sounds like a promise, a key to doors we've only ever dared to imagine. Yet, when you sit quietly and truly face the choices in front of you, you begin to feel the weight beneath that promise. Intellectual freedom, thinking without bounds, questioning without pause, feels like standing at the edge of a vast horizon. The air is crisp, the possibilities endless, and for a moment, it seems exhilarating. But soon, the horizon stretches too far, the sky too wide, and the mind notices something subtle. The freedom to choose is also the freedom to bear responsibility, uncertainty, and a quiet, creeping loneliness. Many people speak of freedom as if it's light, easy, liberating. But anyone who has truly stepped into the realm of unfettered thought knows that the mind does not always welcome such expansiveness. To think freely is to wrestle with every assumption you have ever held. Every tradition, every commonly accepted truth, every simple guideline that once offered comfort now stands as a challenge. And with every challenge comes choice. And with every choice comes consequence. The person who feels most free can also feel most trapped, paradoxically, in the very act of thinking. There's an almost invisible burden in having no rules, no guardrails. At first, it seems trivial. I can think what I want, you tell yourself. I'm my own master. Yet when every path, every opinion, every moral calculation falls into your hands alone, the mind begins to notice the gravity of that responsibility. You may start to hesitate where others rush, overanalyze where others act instinctively, and quietly question even your simplest impulses. The freedom to think independently suddenly carries weight, a pressure that is as silent as it is pervasive. You are no longer shielded by consensus or conformity. Every decision is yours alone to bear, and even the smallest misstep feels amplified. This is where isolation begins. Not the loud, painful kind of loneliness that the world notices, but the subtle, insidious kind that creeps into quiet evenings. When you see the world through an unfiltered lens, when you understand the many shades of truth and contradiction, the conversations around you begin to feel thin, even shallow. Friends speak in patterns of comfort, repetition, and shared simplifications. You nod, you listen, but inside, the mind aches for nuance, for depth that rarely surfaces in casual exchanges. You become the quiet observer, the thinker in the room who understands, at least partially, that most of what is said and done is a kind of polite distraction from the disquieting questions that never stop whispering. And yet, the disquiet has its own strange beauty. In those moments of subtle isolation, of quiet reflection, you discover that knowledge carries its own paradoxical freedom. Knowing too much, seeing too clearly, recognizing layers beneath the surface of everyday life creates tension, but it also illuminates hidden possibilities. You are, in a sense, awake while others sleep, perceiving the invisible architecture of choices, behaviors, and beliefs. That awareness, while lonely, is a kind of power. But power is rarely comfortable, is rarely simple. And this is the first taste of the dark reality of intellectual freedom. The clarity it offers is inseparable from the solitude and weight it demands. Consider the metaphor of standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over an infinite ocean. The wind is exhilarating, the horizon endless. But there is no handrail. There is only the realization that every step you take is yours alone, and the ocean below offers no reassurance, no correction, no easy return. Some are drawn to the edge, enchanted by the freedom to explore. Others fear the drop, seeing only danger. And perhaps the most revealing truth is that those who approach the edge and linger, who dare to walk its narrow ridge, often feel both awe and anxiety in equal measure. This is the first chapter of what freedom costs. Even more quietly, the mind begins to notice its own paradoxical hunger and fatigue. The more you see, the more you question. The more you question, the less certain you become. Certainty was once a comfortable cloak. Now it feels restrictive, almost dishonest. Each answer begets more questions. Each insight reveals another shadow. And so you learn the subtle discipline of patience, of quiet observation, of letting your mind wander without panic, embracing ambiguity without immediate resolution. To think freely is not to solve everything, but to witness everything, both the beauty and the burdens, with clarity and presence. By the end of the day, the illusion of choice becomes more than a philosophical concept. It becomes an intimate experience of life itself. You begin to understand that freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the conscious bearing of responsibility. You understand that to think independently is to walk a path rarely traveled, often misunderstood, and always quietly demanding. And yet, paradoxically, it is also profoundly human. There is a strange peace in knowing the truth of your solitude, in feeling the weight of your choices, in experiencing the subtle thrill of uncharted thought. For in this paradox, the simultaneous burden and beauty of freedom, you catch a glimpse of what it truly means to be awake. Intellectual freedom is seductive, intoxicating, even addictive. It promises the thrill of autonomy, the joy of discovery, the dignity of self-mastery. But it is never light. It never comes without shadow. And perhaps that is precisely why it is so rare, so treasured by those who dare to pursue it. Those who walk this path understand that every moment of insight carries the quiet echo of its cost. And in that echo, in that tension between exhilaration and unease, lies the first lesson of the dark reality of choice, that freedom is never free, and yet, for those willing to embrace it, it is the most genuine form of life there is. To think freely is to wander without a map, to explore ideas, truths, and possibilities that few dare to touch. At first, it feels exhilarating. There's a thrill in knowing that your mind belongs solely to you, that no authority or convention can dictate what you examine or question. But soon, that very thrill begins to reveal its hidden cost. For every idea you explore, every assumption you challenge, there's a ripple in your emotional landscape. Awareness grows, but so does the quiet anxiety that follows it, subtle but persistent, like a shadow stretching behind you, moving with every step you take. Awareness is not always liberating. The more you perceive, the more you understand the hidden mechanics of the world, the motivations, contradictions, and unseen forces that guide human behavior. You begin to see patterns that others overlook, hypocrisies that society conveniently ignores, and the quiet compromises people make to live comfortably within predefined frameworks. With each realization comes a strange pressure, an almost imperceptible anxiety that whispers, "Now that you see this, you are accountable." You cannot unsee the intricacies, the uncomfortable truths, and the hidden costs of life's choices. The freedom of thought carries a weight that can feel heavy, even suffocating at times. Loneliness, too, is a companion of the free thinker. It is not the loud, visible isolation that makes others worry. It is subtler, quieter, a sense that the world you perceive does not quite belong to you. Conversations that once brought comfort now feel shallow, repetitive, almost performative. Friends and colleagues, content in their routines and shared simplifications, speak in ways that fail to satisfy the depth of your mind's curiosity. You nod politely, smile at the right moments, but inside, you are acutely aware of the distance between the surface-level understanding around you and the intricate questions that occupy your thoughts. This is the kind of isolation that validates itself in silence, and yet it can feel unnervingly lonely. The responsibility that comes with free thought is profound. To examine the world without filters is to carry choices that extend beyond the trivial. Moral dilemmas, existential questions, and subtle judgments about behavior and truth all accumulate in the quiet corners of your mind. Others may seek guidance from religion, tradition, or social norms, but you have chosen, or been compelled, to confront uncertainty directly. This confrontation demands courage, yet it also creates a kind of mental tension, a continual awareness that your understanding carries weight and consequence. Freedom without guidance is exhilarating, but it is also exacting. Overthinking becomes almost inevitable. When no answer feels entirely satisfactory, and when every question opens doors to deeper questions, the mind begins to spiral in ways it cannot easily control. Decisions feel heavier, even trivial ones, because they are filtered through layers of insight, empathy, and awareness that most will never experience. You may notice yourself hesitating, overanalyzing, imagining multiple outcomes that might never occur. And yet, even as this overthinking occasionally frustrates you, it is also a mark of engagement, a reflection that your mind is alive, attentive, and unwilling to settle for superficial simplicity. There's also the quiet realization that control is often an illusion. To think freely does not mean you can master the world or your circumstances. Insight does not always translate into action. Knowledge of patterns, motivations, and truths may illuminate possibilities, but life continues to unfold with unpredictability, and the mind can only prepare, not dictate. The paradox of free thought is that it sharpens perception while simultaneously revealing your own limits. Awareness grows, but mastery remains elusive. It is here, in the tension between understanding and control, that the true cost of intellectual freedom becomes apparent. Yet, in these moments of burden and unease, there is also profound growth. Each anxious insight, each lonely realization, each quiet struggle is a form of subtle education, a way of refining perception and deepening understanding. You begin to appreciate the value of patience, the subtle art of observation, and the quiet power of reflection. You learn to sit with uncertainty, to witness complexity without immediate judgment, and to accept that clarity does not always come with comfort. This is a paradox, but it is also the gift of intellectual freedom. It demands, yes, but it also nurtures. There is a strange liberation in understanding the consequences of your own thoughts. By acknowledging the cost, you gain a kind of subtle control, a mindfulness that others rarely achieve. You begin to choose which questions merit your energy, which ideas deserve pursuit, and which truths can be observed without obsession. You navigate the tension between curiosity and peace, discovering that the mind can wander deeply and still find rest, if guided by awareness rather than impulse. Even the anxiety, the loneliness, and the overthinking become familiar companions, reminding you that you are awake, attentive, and alive in a way that most will never experience. This chapter of understanding reveals an uncomfortable truth. Freedom is not always what it seems. The initial thrill of thinking without boundaries is only the surface. Beneath it lies responsibility, isolation, anxiety, and the subtle burden of knowing more than most. Yet, paradoxically, it is within this very burden that depth, insight, and even quiet joy emerge. The person who embraces intellectual freedom learns to navigate not only the world around them, but also the intricate landscapes within themselves. And it is in this navigation, careful, reflective, and at times painfully honest, that true understanding begins to emerge. Thinking freely is, in essence, a form of courage. It is the courage to face solitude, to endure subtle anxiety, to witness life without filters, and to carry the weight of insight without complaint. It is the courage to accept that clarity and comfort rarely coexist, and that wisdom often comes wrapped in quiet struggle. For those willing to bear it, intellectual freedom becomes not just a path, but a practice, a continuous unfolding of mind and awareness that demands presence, patience, and subtle resilience. And within that practice, even the dark costs reveal themselves as essential, inseparable elements of the life you have chosen to live fully awake. True autonomy is a rare state, one that few ever achieve without cost. It is the ability to think, decide, and act according to your own reason, unbound by convention or external expectation. Yet, the freedom that comes with autonomy is not without shadows. In fact, the darker the insight, the more subtle the burdens that accompany it. To truly embrace independent thought is to step into a world where comfort is scarce, certainty is fragile, and understanding often brings unease alongside clarity. One of the earliest signs of this shadow is the internal struggle against authority, both external and internalized. From the moment you question norms or challenge traditions, a tension arises. On one hand, you feel the thrill of discovery, the power of thinking for yourself. On the other, there's a quiet resistance within, a sense of dissonance that whispers, "Are you overstepping? Are you unwise?" The mind has been trained for comfort, for safety, for agreement. When you begin to stray into true independence, it resists subtly, manifesting as doubt, hesitation, or guilt. This internal pushback is a shadow of autonomy, a reminder that true freedom is never easy, never instantaneous, never uncomplicated. Cognitive dissonance becomes a constant companion. The more you observe, the more you realize that your beliefs, values, and experiences do not always align neatly with reality. Life is messy, contradictory, and unpredictable, and your mind, once a haven of simple certainty, now navigates an intricate maze of nuance. Each insight brings both illumination and tension. You understand the limits of what you can control, the fragility of assumptions, and the impermanence of truths. This awareness can feel heavy, yet it is also essential because it teaches discernment, subtlety, and the quiet power of nuanced thinking. Alienation often follows this clarity. When you see layers that others ignore, when your thoughts dive deeper than everyday conversation, you naturally drift from the familiar. People may admire your insight from afar, but the rare moments of true connection are fleeting. Casual friendships, small talk, and social routines begin to feel hollow, insufficient to sustain the depth of mind you now inhabit. This alienation is not a punishment. It is a reflection of your growth. Few will follow your exact path, and the few who do will be treasured, for they understand the landscape in which you move. In solitude, you begin to recognize that being misunderstood is not failure. It is the sign that your thinking is maturing, evolving, and standing apart. Radical honesty, both with yourself and others, magnifies these shadows. Speaking the truth as you perceive it, without compromise, is a courageous act, but it often elicits discomfort, even conflict. People resist what challenges their assumptions, and even those closest to you may struggle to understand the clarity that comes naturally to your mind. Yet, suppressing that honesty feels heavier than the external tension it produces. The paradox is clear. Autonomy demands that you speak and think authentically, yet authenticity can be isolating, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. To embrace it is to accept that discomfort as a necessary companion of growth. With time, a strange form of resilience emerges. You begin to accept the quiet burden of insight, learning to navigate the tension between clarity and comfort. The shadows of autonomy are no longer threats, but guides, subtle markers pointing toward awareness, discernment, and self-mastery. Solitude becomes a space for reflection rather than anxiety. Overthinking transforms into careful observation rather than paralysis. The quiet struggle within becomes a source of strength, a silent testament to the courage required to live fully awake. The journey also cultivates perspective. When you accept that your understanding will always be partial, that certainty is rare and temporary, you develop humility alongside insight. True autonomy is not arrogance or defiance. It is measured, reflective, and patient. It allows you to weigh choices with awareness of their consequences, to observe without attachment, and to act without unnecessary fear. In doing so, you learn that freedom is not a declaration. It is a discipline quietly practiced in thought, word, and deed. Interestingly, this discipline carries its own rewards. The solitude, the cognitive tension, the careful honesty, all create a mind that is both agile and perceptive. You begin to see the subtleties in people, systems, and events that most overlook. You understand patterns without becoming trapped by them. You recognize fleeting truths, yet remain anchored in reason rather than reaction. This level of awareness is a form of quiet mastery, the kind that does not demand recognition, but quietly transforms your relationship with the world and with yourself. And yet, even as mastery grows, the shadows never fully disappear. There will always be moments of doubt, subtle isolation, and the uncomfortable tension of knowing more than most around you. But these shadows are not enemies. They are signs that autonomy is alive within you. They remind you that thinking freely is not about comfort or ease. It is about presence, vigilance, and courage. The discomfort is part of the path, the guideposts of self-awareness, the markers of a mind willing to bear the weight of its own insight. In the end, embracing true autonomy is to accept a paradox. Freedom is inseparable from responsibility, clarity is inseparable from tension, and insight is inseparable from subtle isolation. Yet, within these intertwined realities lies the profound beauty of self-directed thought. You may walk alone at times, navigate internal conflict, and wrestle with complexity that others avoid, but the clarity and awareness you gain are treasures beyond measure. It is a life both heavy and luminous, challenging and deeply authentic, and it is the life of a mind willing to endure the shadows in order to glimpse the quiet power of intellectual freedom. Even in the quiet burden of intellectual freedom, there is a path toward meaning. The shadows that accompany independent thought are not merely obstacles. They are guides, subtle teachers showing where growth and understanding may emerge. To navigate this darkness, one must first embrace solitude not as a punishment, but as a space for reflection. In these moments alone, the mind can wander freely, exploring ideas, emotions, and truths without interference. Solitude becomes a laboratory for self-discovery, a quiet refuge where insight can take root. Thoughtful isolation carries its own strange beauty. When the world feels shallow, repetitive, or uninterested in depth, stepping away is not retreat. It is alignment. The quiet hours spent reading, observing, or simply thinking allow patterns to emerge, connections to be made, and clarity to grow. In this space, you begin to recognize your own rhythm, your unique perspective, and the subtle power of noticing what others often overlook. It is here, in the stillness, that meaning begins to crystallize, forming a bridge between insight and life, between awareness and action. Curiosity becomes the compass within this darkness. The mind that questions relentlessly, that seeks depth over simplicity, discovers that the pursuit itself carries more value than any immediate answer. Each question opens doors to new perspectives. Each insight generates further inquiry, and the journey of exploration becomes a source of fulfillment in itself. The person who embraces this approach learns to savor uncertainty, to see ambiguity not as a threat, but as a fertile ground for growth. In this way, curiosity transforms the burden of thought into a subtle source of liberation. Yet, freedom without purpose can still feel heavy. The mind craves direction, even when it desires exploration. Aligning intellectual freedom with meaningful pursuits is essential to sustain both peace and engagement. When curiosity and insight are directed toward personal growth, creative expression, or the pursuit of deeper understanding, freedom becomes a tool rather than a weight. Purpose adds structure to unbounded thought, transforming wandering into deliberate navigation, and tension into energy that fuels rather than drains. In this alignment, the mind experiences a rare combination of autonomy and fulfillment. Vulnerability, paradoxically, becomes a strength within this framework. The willingness to confront one's own fears, uncertainties, and imperfections allows for authentic growth. Emotional honesty, both with oneself and with others, deepens connection, and provides a mirror through which understanding can expand. Those who think freely often carry hidden struggles, moments of doubt, isolation, or introspection. But by acknowledging these quietly, they transform vulnerability into resilience. The mind learns to balance sensitivity with insight, reflection with action, and solitude with selective connection. As you navigate this delicate balance, subtle clarity begins to emerge. You start noticing patterns not only in the world but also within yourself. Emotional reactions, habitual thoughts, and instinctive behaviors become visible without judgment. Each observation, each subtle insight, strengthens awareness and cultivates a calm confidence that is both rare and sustaining. There is a rhythm in this process, a slow, deliberate unfolding of understanding that rewards patience and reflection more than immediate answers or social validation. Even amidst darkness, moments of light appear. The quiet satisfaction of a mind at work, the small joys of genuine insight, the rare moments of connection with like-minded individuals, all become anchors of meaning. The world may feel indifferent, the majority unconcerned with depth, but these subtle points of resonance provide a sense of belonging. You realize that depth and awareness create a rare tribe, one defined not by numbers or popularity, but by the quality of attention, reflection, and curiosity shared among those few who recognize it. This chapter of understanding emphasizes that meaning is not handed down, it is cultivated. It arises from disciplined attention, from curiosity tempered by reflection, and from the courageous acceptance of solitude and uncertainty. Life does not yield all its truths easily. The act of discovering them is intertwined with effort, patience, and quiet resilience. By embracing this process, the thinker not only endures the shadows of autonomy, anxiety, and isolation, but also discovers the subtle joy of being fully present with one's mind and choices. The darkness, paradoxically, clarifies what matters. Distractions fall away, superficiality loses its charm, and the mind becomes attuned to subtle signals, deeper truths, and the quiet pulse of life beneath appearances. Even anxiety and tension, once burdensome, reveal themselves as signposts, indicators of awareness rather than obstacles. In this light, intellectual freedom is no longer a mere challenge. It becomes a canvas on which purpose, curiosity, and self-understanding are painted with deliberate strokes. Ultimately, finding meaning amid the darkness is an intimate practice of acceptance and engagement. The burden of thought is acknowledged, yet it does not paralyze. Solitude is embraced, yet it does not isolate. Uncertainty is observed, yet it does not overwhelm. By cultivating curiosity, aligning freedom with purpose, and transforming vulnerability into quiet strength, the mind achieves a rare equilibrium. Insight, clarity, and resilience coexist within the same consciousness that once knew only burden and tension, creating a life that is both reflective and profoundly alive. In this way, the darkness is not an enemy, but a guide. The shadows that accompany autonomy reveal the contours of freedom, the weight of awareness, and the delicate art of living fully awake. And as you walk this path, you begin to recognize that meaning is not a distant destination. It is woven into each quiet observation, each moment of deliberate thought, and each act of curiosity nurtured within the calm, attentive mind. In embracing the darkness, the thinker discovers a subtle light, a steady illumination that guides without blinding, comforts without dulling, and ultimately allows life to be experienced with rare depth and authenticity. The journey through intellectual freedom does not end with a declaration of independence from convention, nor with a sudden epiphany that all burdens have vanished. True mastery is quieter, subtler, and far more profound. It emerges not in triumph or outward recognition, but in a patient, almost imperceptible awareness that the mind has learned to navigate its own vast landscape with grace. This mastery is not about controlling the world or commanding attention. It is about understanding the delicate interplay between thought, emotion, curiosity, and presence. It is the art of moving through life with subtle confidence, knowing both the weight and the value of insight. Acceptance is the first step on this path. Acceptance of the unseen burdens that accompany freedom, the anxiety, the moments of isolation, the restless overthinking that once threatened to overwhelm. The thinker comes to realize that these burdens are not obstacles to avoid, but markers of a life fully engaged, a mind awake and attentive. Each twinge of doubt, each pang of subtle tension, is a reminder of the depth of perception and the courage required to live with clarity and honesty. By acknowledging the weight rather than resisting it, tension transforms into quiet focus, and awareness becomes a stabilizing force rather than a source of paralysis. With acceptance comes discernment, the careful art of choosing where to focus, what to pursue, and which battles are worth engaging. Not every insight demands action. Not every observation requires expression, and not every question needs an immediate answer. The mind, once restless, learns to prioritize, reserving its energy for moments of significance and letting the rest unfold naturally. This selective engagement is not retreat. It is strategy, the conscious cultivation of mental and emotional resources that allows clarity and patience to flourish. Over time, the thinker discovers that liberation is found not in doing everything, but in knowing what matters. Connection, too, finds its place in this refined understanding. Though intellectual freedom often carries the risk of isolation, it does not require permanent solitude. The rare moments of authentic connection, shared with those who resonate with depth and reflection, become profoundly nourishing. These interactions are not frequent, but their quality is immense, offering both validation and resonance. The thinker comes to appreciate these rare bonds deeply, recognizing that authenticity and selective vulnerability can coexist with independence. Through such connections, the mind experiences the subtle joy of mutual understanding without the compromises demanded by superficial social engagement. Mastery also reveals itself in the understanding that freedom is an art, not a conquest. It is a quiet, deliberate practice, evident in thought, speech, and action. The mind learns to notice patterns without obsession, to reflect deeply without becoming trapped in indecision, and to act with awareness rather than impulsivity. Liberation is no longer a dramatic pursuit, but a sustained rhythm, a harmony of curiosity and patience. Insight is a companion, not a tormentor. Reflection guides action, not paralysis. This nuanced freedom cultivates a mind that is alert, thoughtful, and profoundly alive, yet simultaneously calm and resilient. Even the shadows of doubt, tension, and subtle anxiety persist, but they are no longer adversaries. They are reminders of presence, awareness, and engagement. The occasional pang of uncertainty, the echo of isolation, the lingering questions, all serve as gentle markers of the mind remains awake and attentive. These shadows, once burdensome, are now companions that signal depth rather than deficiency, teaching the thinker to navigate complexity without losing serenity. In this subtle interplay, mastery and freedom converge, revealing their inseparability. This evolving clarity of perspective is another hallmark of subtle liberation. Life is no longer viewed through the lens of rigid expectations or binary judgments, but as a dynamic, interconnected system of patterns, consequences, and choices. Insights arise naturally, not as sudden, jarring revelations, but as quiet illuminations that reveal the interplay of thought, action, and emotion. The mind becomes both observer and participant, perceiving impermanence without fear, embracing complexity without anxiety, and engaging with life fully yet gracefully. This level of awareness fosters calm confidence, a profound trust in the rhythm of thought and the unfolding of experience. Freedom, mastery, and subtle liberation are intertwined in a delicate equilibrium. Curiosity drives inquiry, reflection fosters understanding, and presence ensures resilience. The thinker no longer seeks validation from the external world, for it is found internally, in the quiet knowledge that the mind is alive, engaged, and capable of navigating life's uncertainties. Insight and serenity coexist, tension and clarity coexist, solitude and connection coexist, all harmonized by the conscious, deliberate cultivation of thought, observation, and reflection. This subtle liberation is a practice, a continual unfolding rather than a final destination. Each day presents new observations, new questions, and new challenges, yet the mind remains centered, aware, and adaptive. Moments of tension arise, as do moments of clarity and joy. The mind embraces uncertainty, appreciates solitude, and engages selectively with the world, finding a rare form of equilibrium. This is the true gift of intellectual freedom, the ability to live fully awake, attentive to life's nuances, and resilient in the face of ambiguity. Ultimately, mastery is not the absence of struggle, but the embrace of it. The thinker understands that shadows, tension, and quiet doubt are part of the rhythm of awareness, not obstacles to it. Liberation is found not in escaping burden, but in integrating it, using it to cultivate patience, reflection, and subtle power. The life of one who has achieved this subtle mastery is neither flashy nor easy, but it is authentic, deeply fulfilling, and quietly powerful. Insight becomes a way of living, freedom a carefully nurtured practice, and solitude a space for reflection rather than loneliness. In the end, the dark reality of intellectual freedom, the tension, responsibility, and subtle isolation, is not a curse but a pathway to profound liberation. Mastery emerges not by eliminating challenge, but by navigating it with grace. Liberation is not loud or dramatic. It is understated, internal, and enduring. The thinker who reaches this state moves through life with calm confidence, embracing complexity with curiosity, carrying solitude with ease, and engaging the world with intentionality, patience, and quiet joy. It is here in this subtle, disciplined, and aware existence that intellectual freedom reveals its ultimate truth, that the richest form of life comes not from ease, but from conscious engagement, reflective insight, and the quiet mastery of one's own mind.